This is the first ever coronavirus pandemic in the world.
COVID-19 is menacing the whole of humanity, and so the whole of humanity must fight back.
COVID-19 may have put a pause button on the world, but it certainly hasn't stopped climate change, nor has it stopped the vulnerabilities and inequalities around the world.
Vital that we combine this with an immediate socioeconomic response that can help people in the here and now, but also allows countries to leverage some of this to come out with a future economy that is more resilient, addresses challenges of sustainability, inequality, and vulnerability in a more effective way.
Hello, everyone. My name is Silke Weinlich. I'm a researcher with the German Development Institute, DIE, based in Bonn, and also a member of the Research Council of the German Association for the United Nations. I would like to warmly welcome all of you to this webinar on COVID-19 and human development, assessing the crisis, envisioning the recovery. This webinar is yet another instance of the long-standing cooperation between the German UN Association and the Human Development Report Office. So let me express again a great thank you here for this fruitful cooperation, as well as my hopes for future joint events in the real world, not only in cyberspace. The COVID-19 pandemic is not only a global health crisis. This sentence is uttered time and again, and it is becoming more and more evident worldwide. COVID-19 is hitting all core areas of human development, including health, jobs, and education. Although we do not yet know the extent at this point in time, there are still ways to respond and to modify the crisis. It is clear that the world is being hit hard, in particular those who are already disadvantaged. Researchers at DIE, together with World Bank economists, estimate that roughly 70 million additional people will fall into extreme poverty worldwide because of COVID-19. And they warn about the growing inequality, which can worsen the pandemic's effects. This is very much in line with the report by the UNDP Human Development Report Office, which will be presented here today, and which takes a human capability approach to assess the crisis and formulate recommendations for recovery. It is therefore my special pleasure to welcome Heriberto Tapia, who's an economist and a senior researcher and writing team member at the Human Development Report Office, where he has been working for more than 5 years. Previously, he served in the Executive Office of UNDP and in the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Our second speaker, whom I would also like to warmly welcome, will then comment on Heriberto's presentation. Uwe Kekeritz, member of the German Bundestag, deputy chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Economic Cooperation and Development, and speaker for development policy of the Bündnis 90, die Grünen, the Green Party parliamentary group. Uwe will provide some comments also with regard to how a country like Germany should and could use its development policies to respond to the shocks and accelerate the recovery. After this, we will have time for some questions and answers by the panelists, while sticking to our 1 hour time slot, I hope. And before I hand over to you, Heriberto, let me also say a few words about the logistics of the event, of how to engage if you would like to ask questions to the speakers, etc. Uwe Kekeritz will speak in German. Therefore, this event will be translated from German into English. If you rely on the English translation, please take part using Zoom, not YouTube. Only on Zoom you can listen to the English translation. And if you would like to comment and ask questions to our two guests after the presentations, you have two options. If you have a good internet connection and a working microphone and are happy to be part of the recording on YouTube, you can ask your question yourself. And if you have a question but prefer me to ask it to the panelists, you can also do so. Either way, please use the Q&A tool to formulate your question. And if you would like to raise it yourself, please indicate this by writing "by myself." And your question will only be visible to the technical team that supports this event and also to myself. So have this in mind when you now listen to Heriberto. You can already start typing your questions. But now, Heriberto, the floor is yours for your roughly 20-minute presentation. Thank you. Heriberto?
Yes, thank you, Silke, for the invitation. For me, it's a pleasure to be here, even in these difficult times. I'm now trying to share my window to start the presentation. Can you see it? Okay. Good. So thank you again for this opportunity. I'm gonna be talking about a report that we launched like a month ago, assessing the effects of COVID-19 on human development, and also trying to give some ideas for the design of policies. I have updated some of the numbers, but the conclusions remain more or less the same. So I'm gonna make 3 points. First, emphasize that this is an unprecedented crisis that touches all the dimensions of human development, to the point that it's threatening much of the progress that as a humanity we have achieved over the last few decades. Second, that inequality matters, that some groups, some countries have been particularly affected, and also that some of these effects are long-lasting. I don't have much time to explain this in this presentation, but this is something that we explore in depth in the paper. And it's important to have in mind that while some countries or some groups might be seeing the recovery and there are some good news, there would be others that would be suffering from this crisis for a long time. And finally, I would try to make some points around the strategy. And here, where our main point is that we need to focus on people's capabilities. There is a lot of uncertainty, and it's not very clear. We have all seen how facing this crisis is challenging for policymakers. So one key area of action is giving people the opportunities for them to figure things out and to increase their capabilities that will allow them to face the remaining part of the crisis, but at the same time build capabilities that will help them with their long-term human development. So let me start with this important element, that is how widespread this crisis is. It's affecting every country in the world, and it's affecting them more or less at the same time, and in many dimensions. So in health, we have almost 500,000 confirmed dead people. These are direct deaths from the COVID-19. A lot of the effect is yet to come, in particular in developing countries. In terms of income, we see that most countries in the world are facing a recession in 2020, and in the aggregate, the income per capita is expected to fall 6% in 2020, according to the World Bank in a recent study. This is affecting very hard the bottom part of the population. As was mentioned, we can have an additional 100 million people falling into extreme poverty. In education, this is a sector greatly disturbed by the crisis. 9 out of 10 kids have faced the closure of schools. In terms of work, a big reduction in working hours and increasing unemployment. This is equivalent to 300 million people million workers in the second quarter of this year. So this is massive. And we have many effects related to gender, certainly an increase in domestic violence, according to different reports, but also the burden of care is being especially problematic for women. And also we see that we expect that in the recovery it would be more challenging for some, for women and girls to come back to normal. So there are some studies based on previous crises that say that, for instance, girls that have left schools because of a crisis have a lower probability of coming back. So just to give you a sense of how widespread is this crisis. If we focus on the health dimension, you can see here what's happening with the direct confirmed death from COVID-19. Very high number every day, more than 4,000, 5,000. This is more than the deaths that we have from other important illnesses like HIV, malaria, etc. So this is putting a lot of pressure on ourselves. But also you can see the dynamic. This is sustained, but now we are entering into a new wave. So this is going up. We updated this figure this morning, so it's quite up to date. It's going up, and you can see that this is explained predominantly by what is happening in developing countries. So while in developed countries the situation is getting better and better, in developing countries, in particular now in Latin America, the number of dead people is going up. These are direct deaths. Unfortunately, we expect also a very significant number of indirect deaths. So there is a study that says that for the second semester of this year, in the case of child mortality, we expect between 250,000 and more than 1 million deaths because of lack of attention, because resources are being diverted for COVID-19, or because people don't feel secure to go to the hospital. So it's a big issue, and there are certainly we need to raise awareness about this, because there are policies that can be put in place to prevent that this becomes a reality. Most countries have been taking measures. This is to give you an idea of how mobility has been restricted around the world, countries with different levels of development. Basically, this has touched everyone. Something important to have in mind is that this restricts a lot the toolkit of policymakers to address this crisis, for instance, from the economic point of view, because it is hard to stimulate the economy if at the same time we are telling people to remain at home. On the other hand, this has implications for the situation in developing countries. You can see that since March, most developing countries have been restricting mobility. So by now, they have gone through 3 months of restrictions, and they are still in the middle of the crisis. So this adds complexity to the way they face the crisis. This is another element, education, a hugely disturbed sector. At some point, we had 1.5 billion children out of school, and even in countries that are in the opening phase, there is a lot of uncertainty on when is the right time to reopen schools. So this is generating a lot of uncertainty, and we are still trying to understand what are going to be the long-term effects of these closures. Unfortunately, in many sectors, there has been the opportunity to continue learning through online resources, but as we will see, this is something that has impacted, has a moderated effect, but in a very unequal way. So if we combine some of these elements, not all of them, but some of them in a single index, and here we are using the Human Development Index, which is an indicator that tries to measure capabilities in people, looking not only at income, but also at what's happening with education and what's happening with health, measured by life expectancy at birth. We can have a sense of the overall effect of this crisis. We have been measuring human development through this index since 1919, and in every year, even the bad years, this index has increased, even if a little. You can see that in 2008, 2009, during the global financial crisis, there was an effect in this index, but was still a positive change. For this year, we have made an effort to try to see what's happening with capabilities and making an adjustment in terms of what's happening in schools. So because the official indicator is based on enrollment rate, which is a variable that it's an administrative data. It's a paper said that there is a kid that is enrolled. We have tried to measure not enrollment, but effective attendance. So taking into account whether schools were closed or not, and whether a student had access to internet to continue learning. So after making this correction and based on also some other estimates, we have simulated what would be the evolution of the Human Development Index in 2020. And you can see that first, it would be the first fall in the history of this indicator. And second, it would be massive. So it would be the fall that we are simulating here is equivalent to the last 6 years of progress. So this is to give you a sense of how deep this crisis is, and is the result of the combination of different elements that are happening at the same time. Now, as Silke mentioned, that there is an issue of inequality that is very crucial to integrate in our understanding of this crisis. Here it's an example of what happens with in the cases of countries facing school closures. Here we have the out-of-school rate. The blue bars are the out-of-school rates in primary education before the closure, and the red bars are the out-of-school rates after the closure. So this is the effective out-of-school rate that corrects by the ability of children to access education through internet. And we see how first there is a big reversal from 9.5 to almost 60% in the out-of-school rate. So this is a huge reversal, really bad news. But second, that this effect is very different between countries. In very high human development countries, the out-of-school rate is 20%. In low human development countries, is 86%. So, and if we have done this exercise within countries, so we have similar results. So there is the within country inequality play a big role in how different kids have the opportunity to keep learning. And a third point that is important to notice here is that the setback was particularly important in medium human development countries. So the middle classes are being particularly hit by this. And this is the result of the fact that they don't have the resources of the upper classes, the private resource, but also they don't have the public support, and sometimes of the extreme poor, and also they have more to lose. So, and this is very problematic because this is a segment of the population that had made a lot of gains over the last few years, and now they are seeing that in education, but also in income generation and in other areas, that this crisis is taking them back, and this might create instability. So now, few principles for solutions going forward. I think it's important when we think about building back better to understand what are the problems that we had in the first place. And this crisis is coming in a world that had some problems. First, tensions between people and technologies. There are technologies that are good in general for the economy, but are leaving people without a job. So it's possible that now a big part of the people that have lost their jobs because of the crisis, they are receiving some help from governments for subsistence, but when the health crisis is over, they might not be able to find a new job. So that's a big issue. Second, we have a crisis tension with the planet. So human activity is creating extinction of the species, and we know that global warming is accelerating. So it is crucial that whatever we do now contributes to the process of curbing the process of global warming. And finally, we have the tensions that are caused by inequalities. So on this, I think we don't have to forget that just a few months ago, by the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020, we had a wave of protests around the world. And these were not about people complaining about the basic, these were mostly middle classes that were complaining about their inability to have access to the resources of the people, of the elites. They wanted to have their dignity protected, and these tensions have not disappeared. So we have every reason to believe that precisely the middle classes are the ones that are suffering particularly now. So therefore, it's important to bring some support to them. So in terms of general principles for policies, we are advocating for a multidimensional approach. We can see how this crisis is multidimensional, affecting health, economy, education, jobs. So in the design of the solution, it's important to have that in mind, and in particular to be able to identify the policies that might have a multiplier effect, that are able to not just address one of these points, but more than one, so we can take advantage of that multiplier effect. Second, crucial, the equity lens, to give more where we have less. So there, inequality is a huge problem, and this is this crisis demands a more equitable approach. And third, it's important to think about what is going to happen in the future beyond today. And here, it's, as I mentioned at the beginning, it is very important to empower people, to give them the tools to deal with this crisis, but also build a better future for themselves. And this includes the ability to prevent and cope with future crises that unfortunately are expected in part in relation to the process of climate change. Also, it's important to have in mind that we were not doing well with respect to the Global Development Agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's an opportunity to also to acknowledge what we can do. So people during this crisis have resorted to different type of actions and organizations, and this has shown that we can do more than we were used to, and therefore it's an opportunity to see how we can catch up with respect to the Sustainable Development Goals. Here, just let me give you one example of a type of policy that somehow meets all these criteria. So it targets multiple goals and with a forward-looking view. And this is the access to internet. And this is looking at it through the lens of education. So here we have the effective out-of-school rate since 1970. And we can see how this has been affected in 2020. It's jumped to the level of the mid-80s. However, we have here two scenarios. What would have happened without internet? So the jump would have been much greater. But then what would happen if we had closed the internet gap, not in absolute terms, but within countries with the same level of development? So we have had a relatively small jump. So this matters, and the resources that we need to close the internet gap are equivalent to only 1% of the resources that are being spent, are being committed to deal with this crisis. So it's it's a lot of money. It's more than $100 billion, but this is attainable, and it's something that might have not only effects on education. There are irreversible changes in education that require more of this, but also it will help with jobs. It will help to promote the development of the economies, and it will help with health. So there are many reasons, and also there is a human rights angle here that most of our activities now are have a electronic counterpart, and so we need to be able to give access to this possibility to everyone. A final point is that countries are committing a lot of action to this day, more than $10 trillion. This is huge. But here, the more developed countries are able to do more than the less developed countries. So it's important to promote global cooperation as a principle. And second, these are resources that probably are going to be paid by the next generation. So it's important to give to have accountability, to give the power to people to make sure that these resources are spent in a way that do not compromise the well-being of future generations. So this means these resources have to be mindful of the environment. So I'm going to stop here. I'm happy to receive your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heriberto. That was a very interesting and helpful presentation. And I have to admit that thinking ahead what school closures and other measures to slow down the pandemic mean in the mid to long run is really quite disheartening. And the graph which showed the drop or the massive fall in human development was really impressive, I have to say, in a very negative way. Yet I liked very much that you did not stop at this analysis, but also provided some ideas on how to react to the pandemic and prioritize and how to sort of avoid this massive fall. By the way, more than 130 people are currently listening to what we're talking about, so I think that's a very good sign. I might be mistaken, but I think sort of the idea of what can be done now and how things should be done is also something which is appealing to you, Mr. Kekeritz. The German Bundestag has authorized 3 additional billion euro for the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development for its COVID-19 response plan for this year and next year. And you and your party, you've been analyzing and following this very closely, I guess. So, Mr. Kekeritz, what are your thoughts and comments on what you just heard, and what do you think should Germany do or do differently? Just a reminder here, translation is offered on Zoom, so just click the button which is on your right hand down on the furthest right.
Yeah, herzlichen Dank. I could also try to speak in English, but nobody really would enjoy my English, so I prefer to speak in German. So, herzlichen Dank für die Einladung und aus meiner Sicht für den hervorragenden Vortrag, den Heriberto gerade vorgestellt hat. Ich kann Ihnen versichern, besser formulieren und detaillierter vortragen kann ich das auch nicht. Irgendjemand müsste jetzt noch den Lautsprecher ausmachen, weil es gibt fürchterliche Rückkoppelungen. Silke, können Sie Ihren? Ja, jetzt ist besser. Also der Bericht, den finde ich hervorragend und auch stimmig, und auch der Ansatz, welche Antworten jetzt eigentlich geboten werden müssten, fand ich sehr gut. Ich sehe darin zurzeit eine ganz, ganz große Gefahr. Wir sind in Deutschland, ich spreche jetzt mal speziell von Deutschland, aber ich weiß von anderen Ländern, da ist die gleiche Problematik vorhanden, dass die Lösungsansätze darin bestehen, möglichst schnell wieder auf Wachstumskurs zu kommen, völlig egal, welche Probleme damit verbunden sind. Gerade unsere Politik und die Wirtschaftsweisen, die sind darüber entsetzt, dass wir erst 2022 wieder dieses Sozialprodukt erreichen, das wir zurzeit haben. Und das ist genau nicht der Lösungsansatz, den wir brauchen. Die Krise wird leider immer noch nicht als Chance begriffen. Und gerade in der Krise und durch die Krise bestünde ein erhebliches Potenzial, Weichen neu zu stellen. Ich nehme jetzt an, dass es hauptsächlich deutsche Zuhörer sind und Zuschauer sind. Darum lassen Sie mich einfach dieses Beispiel, worin das Potenzial eigentlich besteht, am Beispiel von Tönnies, der Schlachterei erklären. Ja, die Politik hätte doch jetzt wirklich ganz hervorragende Chancen, schnell gesetzliche Maßnahmen gegen die Arbeitsbedingungen durchzudrücken. Und warum? Weil eben die Öffentlichkeit das einfach nicht mehr akzeptiert, was da passiert. Und das zentrale Argument für Änderungen, das ist doch das Argument der Würde des Menschen. Aber da gibt es noch ein zweites Argument, das wir unbedingt auch einführen müssen, nämlich die Missachtung der Würde des Menschen schädigt uns alle. Nicht nur hier in der Schlachterei, sondern auch im internationalen Bezug und auch im Verhältnis zu Entwicklungsländern. Und das bringt mich zu den SDGs, zur SDG Nummer 10. Sie wissen, SDG Nummer 10 darin verpflichten sich die Länder, 190 Länder haben das unterschrieben, die Ungleichheit zwischen den Ländern und innerhalb der Länder abzubauen. Das ist also nicht meine Idee, sondern das haben 190 Länder unterschrieben. Auch Angela Merkels Unterschrift steht darin. Und die SDGs sind hochinteressant, auch in Bezug auf SDG 10. Man muss einmal die Einleitung zu diesen SDGs sich durchlesen. Und da wird darauf hingewiesen, dass wir alle Ziele von SDG vergessen können, wenn wir es nicht schaffen, diese Ungleichheit abzubauen. Ich will das nur an einem einzigen Beispiel klar machen, damit auch wirklich die Bedeutung dieser Ungleichheit klar wird. Nehmen wir mal Plastik im Meer. Ein SDG sagt, wir müssen die Meere sauber halten. Ja? Aber wir müssen uns auch darüber im Klaren sein, dass die Plastikproduktion einfach ganz viel Geld einbringt. Und wenn wir jetzt die Plastikproduktion verbieten oder auch dramatisch reduzieren würden, wären damit die Ölindustrie, die chemische Industrie, die Verpackungsindustrie, der Handel erheblich getroffen. Die würden auf erhebliche Gewinne verzichten. Also auf ein Stück Ungleichheit würden die dann verzichten. Und dazu sind sie einfach nicht bereit. Andererseits können wir auch sagen, das Meer kriegen wir erst sauber, wenn weniger Plastik produziert wird. Ja, da ist also der Zusammenhang. Die Ungleichheit ist die zentrale Frage in Bezug auf SDG 1, Armut, SDG 2, Hunger, SDG 3, Krankheit, Gesundheit. Also wir können nur da erfolgreich sein, wenn wir das SDG 10 endlich auch wirklich massiv angehen. Sie haben mich nach der Bundesregierung gefragt und was denn diese Regierung tatsächlich unternimmt. Ja, da bin ich jetzt eigentlich mal mit Minister Müller, obwohl ich der schärfste Kritiker seiner Politik bin, sehr einverstanden. Er hat gleich relativ schnell 1 Milliarde innerhalb seines Haushaltes umgeschichtet, um Mittel gegen die Folgen der Pandemiemaßnahme für Entwicklungsländer bereitstellen zu können. Allerdings, wie diese Mittel eingesetzt werden, das waren wir nicht in der Lage zu erfragen. Dann hat er es auch noch geschafft, 3,1 Milliarden aus den beiden Nachtragshaushalten vom Olaf Scholz abzutrotzen. Ja, tatsächlich 3,1 Milliarden für das Jahr 2020 und 2021 stehen noch zur Verfügung. Zusätzlich, und da muss ich ein dickes Lob an Müller aussprechen, und er hat es auch noch geschafft, obwohl es gar nicht sein Haushalt ist, sondern der Haushalt des Außenministers. Er hat noch geschafft, 450 Millionen für die humanitäre Hilfe zusätzlich bereitzustellen. Das finde ich großartig. Wir können auch mal nach Europa gucken. Da gibt es ganz andere Zahlen. Europa will 15,6 Milliarden bereitstellen, aber vorsichtig. Europa will diese 15,6 Milliarden durch Umschichtungen bereitstellen und dann für Corona-Projekte bereitstellen. Was heißt denn das? Also die Entwicklungsländer haben ein Etat von 15,6 Milliarden. Jetzt kommt die EU her, nimmt diese 15,6 Milliarden weg. Die stehen nicht mehr zur Verfügung für Infrastruktur, für Ernährung, für Bildung, für Digitalisierung und andere Bereiche. Die stehen da nicht mehr zur Verfügung. Jetzt hat die EU die 15,6 Milliarden wieder in der Hand und jetzt gibt sie die 15,6 Milliarden wieder an die Entwicklungsländer aus und sagt, da schaut mal her, wir geben euch 15,6 Milliarden zur Bekämpfung der Folgen der Corona-Pandemie. Ich denke, das ist Zynismus pur. Wenn man will, kann man sagen, die Entwicklungsländer zahlen ihre eigene Hilfe für die Folgen der Corona-Pandemie selbst. So geht es definitiv nicht und das kritisiert Müller auch zu Recht. Wir unterstützen ihn dabei und deswegen fordert Müller auch 50 Milliarden an neuem Geld, das noch nicht gebunden ist, für die Entwicklungsländer. Und Müller hat da eine ganz richtige Kalkulation aufgemacht, die ich auch für richtig finde. Allein Deutschland stellt 218 Milliarden für Konjunkturprogramme zur Verfügung. Insgesamt mit Krediten und Bürgschaften wird die Bundesrepublik Deutschland auf ca. 1,6 Billionen kommen. Und wenn wir das jetzt einmal auf die EU hochrechnen, ich weiß nicht, wie viele Billionen da rauskommen, 3, 4, 5 Billionen, dann muss man sagen, sind 50 Milliarden für diese EU eben auch wirklich nicht so viel. Angela Merkel ist sehr viel zurückhaltender. In ihren Reden hat sie wohl eingestanden, dass wir noch lange nicht über Berg sind und dass wir auch solidarisch mit den Entwicklungsländern sein müssen. Und ja, das war es eigentlich. Und dann hat sie noch zugesagt, wenn wir einen Impfstoff haben, dann wird sie sich persönlich dafür einsetzen, dass dieser Impfstoff auch gerecht verteilt wird, global. Ich kann nur hoffen, dass das auch so ist, denn momentan zeichnet sich ab, dass wir tatsächlich eine Vergrößerung und der Ungleichheit global feststellen können. Es könnte auch zu der sogenannten Triage kommen, dass wir die tatsächlich dann auch abkoppeln, die ärmsten Länder dieser Welt von der globalen Entwicklung. Wir haben auch natürlich uns bei den Grünen sehr viel Gedanken gemacht über Lösungswege. Covid-19-Pandemie zeigt eindeutig, dass es nur gemeinsam geht. Wir brauchen also wirklich eine globale Zusammenarbeit auf UN-Ebene und wir brauchen da auch eine Institution und die heißt Weltgesundheitsorganisation, die einfach mehr Befugnisse und vor allen Dingen haben muss und vor allen Dingen auch sehr viel mehr Mittel haben muss. Es kann nicht sein, dass die Beiträge heute im Prinzip immer noch durch die Gründungsveranstaltung in den 50er Jahren definiert werden. Also die WHO ist massiv unterfinanziert, das muss sich ändern. Außerdem müssen die EU und auch Deutschland mit der G20, Weltbank und IWF dazu beitragen, dass weitere notwendige Maßnahmen zur Stabilisierung des Wirtschafts- und Finanzsystems erfolgen. Wir haben ja ein Moratorium der G20 erreicht. Da werden die Länder sind dann nicht verpflichtet, ihre Zinsen und ihre Tilgungen zu zahlen. Das Moratorium läuft aber schon in diesem Jahr aus. Und wir wissen, dass die Wirtschaftskraft in den Ländern absolut zusammengebrochen ist. Es ist völlig naiv anzunehmen, dass ab Januar 2021 die auch nur annähernd in der Lage sein werden, ihre Kredite und Zinsen zu zahlen. Daran ist überhaupt nicht zu denken. Und deswegen brauchen wir auf internationaler Ebene eben tatsächlich nicht ein Moratorium, sondern tatsächlich ein Schuldenerlass. Und wir brauchen endlich auch ein Staateninsolvenzverfahren, damit hier grundsätzlich mal die Finanzsituation der Länder verbessert werden kann. Wir haben ja die Analyse über die Zahlungsfähigkeit der Länder. Wir wissen, dass 124 Länder vor Corona im Prinzip schon am Rande der Insolvenz waren. Mit Corona, ich weiß nicht, wie viel das da mehr sein werden, auf jeden Fall sehr viel mehr. Und vor allen Dingen werden die Länder, die schon vor Corona gelitten haben, nach Corona-Zeiten auch überhaupt nicht mehr in der Lage sein, ihre Schulden zu tilgen. Und da muss man einfach das eingestehen. Die sind nicht in der Lage dazu und man kann einem nackten Menschen nicht in die Hosentaschen greifen, um was rauszuholen. Das ist unbedingt notwendig. Die Pandemie, und das ist Heribertos Vortrag ja auch gewesen, verstärkt definitiv die Ungleichheiten und vor allen Dingen, das ist die Erfahrung aus den letzten 30, 40 Jahren, Krisen haben einfach die Tendenz, Ungleichheiten zu verstärken. Die Starken, die Großen gehen aus den Krisen immer gestärkt hervor und die Schwachen gehen eben auch geschwächt raus. Das war schon immer so und das ist etwas, was wir endlich mal durchbrechen müssen, denn eines muss uns klar sein, wenn wir diese Krise erfolgreich bekämpfen wollen, dann geht das nur global. Und wenn wir jetzt sagen, wir Deutschen, wir Europäer, uns ist das Hemd näher als die Hose, dann vergessen wir ganz einfach, dass diese Krise sofort wieder zurückkommt zu uns und uns auch treffen wird. Und deswegen ist es wirklich wichtig, dass wir gemeinsam arbeiten. Vielleicht noch einen Punkt. Wir wissen, dass Frauen in der Krise auch zu denjenigen gehören, die stärker betroffen sind als zum Beispiel Männer. Und deswegen ist es auch ganz wichtig, das Thema Frauen ganz besonders in den Fokus zu nehmen, um da die Situation nicht noch weiter verschlechtern zu lassen. Über Bildung und so weiter hat ja Heriberto schon vieles gesagt. Ich möchte an dieser Stelle aufhören, damit auch die Leute noch Chancen haben, Fragen und Kommentare abzugeben. Dankeschön.
Yeah, many thanks, Mr. Kekeritz. I might wait a second for the translation to finish. I think I listened in and it was long, the translation, but I hope that all our English participants could follow your thoughts on that, and actually also listen to you saying that Minister Müller is doing quite a good job and has...
Don't exaggerate, yeah?
Well, I don't want to exaggerate, but I thought I heard you saying things like that. Anyways, but you also said that inequalities are the most important factor to look at in this crisis, and international cooperation is very important. Now, I am faced with a couple of questions which people have been typing. I also have couple of questions myself. I suggest that I formulate 4 questions to the two of you. And I have, hang on, maybe I start, now it's getting complicated, with a question from myself to Heriberto. And I would, just a brief one, you said, or the Human Development Report 2020 actually came to the conclusion that with considerable investment, it is still possible to reach the goal of abolishing extreme poverty. How do you think about this now in the Human Development Report Office? I mean, what does this mean? Should we still take the Agenda 2030 as our guiding framework, or do we have to modify? And then I go to the questions from participants, and there's one from Estrella, hang on. And she asks 2 questions. Every country, also to Mr. Tapia, every country has implemented a different way of determining COVID-19 deaths. Has this been taken into account in the analysis? First question. And the second question is, would it be correct to say that the incredible setback in human development is due mainly to the policies implemented by the countries rather than by the virus itself? And she also liked very much the slide concerning the solutions and overlapping crises. So then, just as a warning to our technical team, we have Mrs. Lengfelder, who wants to ask a question to Mr. Kekeritz. Maybe she can do so after the question I asked. It was part of the report, not so much of Heriberto's presentation, but the report also says we have to now also grab on the gains which were made during the crisis, such as less pollution, such as more telemedicine or more home office, things like that. Mr. Kekeritz, what would you think? Is Germany doing, can you see something like that in Germany? And what else should we sort of try to keep from the crisis and the crisis response? And now to Ms. Lengfelder.
Guten Morgen. Ja, mein Name ist Christina Lengfelder. Ich arbeite im Human Development Report Office in New York im Team von Heriberto Tapia.
Maybe do it in English. I think it's easier.
Oh, of course. Sure. I was just so excited that actually this is my mother tongue and I can work in my mother tongue. I've been out of Germany for 15 years, so this is an exciting event for me. My name is Christina Lengfelder. I work for the Human Development Report Office in New York. I'm part of Heriberto Tapia's team. And my question to you, Mr. Kekeritz, is here in New York, we were actually looking towards Germany as an example of success to contain the coronavirus We are a little bit better now here in New York as well, but I still feel that Germany has done a very good job in containing the virus, and that due to that, the reopening is also going quite successfully, maybe with the exception of the Tönnies case and some other cases that are rather spotted. But still, I think especially the fact that there are only little hotspots now turning up, but the overall virus I would consider is very well contained, which is also part of a result of the containment policies, I think. I would like to hear from you. What do you think is the recipe of success, let's say, for the German containment of the virus? We've been discussing that within our office, and we feel that there might be some lessons that Germany can share for other countries to contain the virus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I suggest I give back to the panelists for brief answers, because I have more questions coming in. So please, Mr. Heriberto, would you like to start?
Thank you, Silke. First, I wanted to congratulate Uwe for his remarks. I think very interesting. Just quickly, the emphasis on education, the emphasis on international cooperation, the emphasis on this spending as investments are very important, and I appreciate those. So about the question, I think we need to, in this crisis, we need to be able to remain the level of ambition with respect to extreme poverty, because I think we should realize that if we do things differently, eventually we are going to be able to help people at the bottom, but also give them the capabilities to become self-sufficient. So and for this, I think it's key to raise the standard. So this is why, for instance, it's so crucial for us to to close the internet gaps, because now we have half of the world population that doesn't have access to internet, and now this is a means of work, it's a means of study. So if we are able to bring the half of the population to the 21st century, which is something attainable. I was talking about an investment that is 1% of the resources committed. I think that might help to bring people out of poverty, giving them not resources but the tools to perform better in the new economy. About the question in terms of measurement, yeah, it's a very sensitive issue. But we are using the data that has been standardized. Countries might have their own accountings, but this is data that is being standardized by internationally recognized institutions. So I think it's relatively comparable. Having said that, we know that this data depends on data from the countries, so it's likely that it is underestimating, in particular in developing countries, the number of deaths. Is this a problem of the policy, so it's a problem of the virus? It's an open question. I think certainly a virus is a shock. It's going to cause problems. However, now we can see that if we had prepared ourselves in a certain way, now we would be better off. So we can see some success cases of countries that had invested first on infrastructure to precisely do tracking of the viruses. Those countries have been doing much better. Countries that also have a better health system in general are doing better. So I think policies matter. Policies also matter in education. Policies also matter with the economy. And something very important is that it might be the case, this is not confirmed, that the fact that we have these shocks, these viruses, has to do with the way we interact with nature. So this is something, another angle that we need to be mindful of. And finally, the question about how to use the gains that we have achieved during this period. I think, yeah, there are some things that are unavoidable, and progress in terms of crisis, people adjust, and I think the technological side of this is, I mean, it's unstoppable. We are going to be transitioning to economies that rely way more on technologies, and that has a very good side, but also it's a bad side if we don't make sure that this is accessible to everyone. With pollution, I'm not very optimistic. The latest data is that pollution is going up very fast after just a few weeks. Over.
Thank you. Uwe Kekeritz, please.
Ja, Silke, danke für diese Fragen. Und Heriberto hat ja auch gerade gesagt, also natürlich war das eine kleine Erholung klimatechnisch gesehen, aber das ist viel zu kurz, um wirklich eine Änderung herbeizuführen. Was sollten wir denn tatsächlich? Ich wohne 150 Kilometer vom Frankfurter Flughafen weg. 150 Kilometer ist ja was. Aber wenn ich auf meiner Terrasse liege, bei normalen Zeiten sehe ich wirklich tausende solcher Kondensstreifen jeden Tag und die vergiften natürlich die Umwelt. Jetzt in den letzten 3 Monaten war nichts mehr. Das hat mir einfach gut getan. Ja, was sollten wir beibehalten? Das Homeoffice wurde angesprochen. Natürlich, Homeoffice ist natürlich eine feine Sache und meine Mitarbeiter haben auch die Möglichkeit, immer zu sagen, also wir haben keine Zeit, wir würden das lieber von zu Hause machen. Das konnten sie schon immer machen. Aber es ist natürlich auch so, dass meine Mitarbeiterin mit 2 kleinen Kindern sagt, also ich will ins Büro, ich halte das zu Hause nicht mehr aus. Und es ist nicht einfach so möglich zu sagen, also ich mache zu Hause Kinder und Homeoffice. Das funktioniert einfach nicht und das ist einfach auch Betrug und eine doppelte Belastung und das ist eigentlich niemandem vorzuwerfen. Also pflichtmäßig würde ich da kein Homeoffice einführen. Was wir in der jetzigen Zeit einfach versäumt haben, ist tatsächlich diese vielen, vielen Milliarden, die wir in die Hand nehmen, auch wirklich sinnvoll einzusetzen. Wir subventionieren hier eine Lufthansa, die nicht konkurrenzfähig ist und eigentlich auch nicht konkurrenzfähig war. Es gibt auf der ganzen Welt keine Luftfahrtlinie, die wirklich auf festen, gesicherten Boden steht. Es ist eher ein permanenter Überlebenskampf, ob das jetzt Saudi-Arabien sind oder Eritrea oder Inder oder sowas, die sind alle am Limit und da ist es einfach falsch, in eine solche Technologie zu stecken, anstatt dass man tatsächlich sagt, man nimmt dieses Geld und sorgt dafür, dass wir einen öffentlichen Nahverkehr bekommen, einen öffentlichen Verkehr weiter ausbauen und die soziale Komponente, die ist auch völlig ignoriert worden. Ich denke, da sind viele Fehler gemacht worden. Und das führt mich auch zu Frau Lenkfelder, die gesagt hat, ja, also Deutschland hat auch einen ganz guten Job gemacht. Ja, wir haben Gott sei Dank den Trump in den USA und nicht hier. Das hat die Situation erleichtert. Wir haben aber damals auch unter den chinesischen Bildern, da sind wir recht gut informiert worden, ein bisschen unter Schock gestanden. Dann kam plötzlich Ischgl, dann kam der Karneval und ein Bierzelt dazu. Und plötzlich hatten wir solche wirklichen Hotspots in Deutschland. Gerade auch in Bayern war das sehr stark verbreitet. Und da war es schon möglich, dass die Regierung eben wirklich diese Ausgangssperren durchsetzen konnten. Und die Bürgerinnen und Bürger haben das ja auch mitgetragen. Und das ist natürlich schon ein ganz wichtiger Aspekt dabei gewesen. Und deswegen haben wir auch die Krise vermieden. Und wir haben auch schon von Anfang an gesagt, das Gesundheitssystem, das wird überlastet, wenn wir nicht massiv dagegen gehen. Und das war eines der großen Vorteile. Natürlich haben wir mit unserer Politik auch zum Teil übertrieben. Wenn ich mir vorstelle, dass Italien um Hilfe gerufen hat, wir würden doch bitte mal ein paar solche Lungenmaschinen ihnen zur Verfügung stellen und so weiter. Da haben wir uns schlicht verweigert. Und das hat der europäischen Idee enorm geschadet. Auch die Grenzschließungen, die kamen viel zu schnell und viel zu unkoordiniert. Und das hat böses Blut gemacht. Jetzt haben sie gelernt, dass also die Grenzen offen bleiben müssen und dass das auch nicht das Entscheidende ist für die Ausbreitung des Viruses. Und wir haben viele Fehler gemacht. Ich glaube, gerade was auch so das Tragen mit dem Mundschutz anging, da haben erst die Virologen gesagt, das bringt gar nichts. Dann haben sie gesagt, vielleicht bringt es ein bisschen was. Jetzt weiß man, 50% Ansteckungsreduzierung ist damit eigentlich tatsächlich tatsächlich verbunden. Interessant ist ja, dass in diesem Jahr zum ersten Mal die Grippewelle ausgeblieben ist. Ja, die gab es schlicht nicht. Es gab wohl einige Leute mit Grippe, aber es gab keine Grippewelle. Und wir hatten jedes Jahr Grippewelle bisher. Also insofern ist das doch ein klares Zeichen dafür, dass der Mundschutz wirkt. Lessons learned from Germany, wenn ich mir vorstelle, dass Trump in seiner ersten Wahlkampfrede gesagt hat, ihr müsst doch bloß weniger testen, dann sind auch die Infektionsraten nicht so. Also da kann man wirklich nicht von Lessons learned sagen, man muss die Sache ernst nehmen. Und wenn die Politik die nicht ernst nimmt, dann wird es auch die Bevölkerung nicht ernst nehmen. Das ist ein ganz großes Problem in den USA, aber auch Bolsonaro in Brasilien, da haben wir das gleiche Problem. Ja, also man muss aufeinander schauen, was machen die, was machen jene, was ist positiv. Aber da gehört ein politischer Wille dazu. Und wenn der nicht da ist, ist es schwierig.
Okay, vielen Dank. Ich würde jetzt gerne noch ein paar, sorry, now I got infected by the German speaking.
Yes.
Sorry, we're coming close to our ending, but nevertheless, I would like to ask a couple of questions to the two panelists and then give you final words, basically. We have several people asking to both of you, how long will it take for the world to cope with the pandemic? Can we ever go back to where we were before? Then we have the question by Umair, which I very much like because it points at the tensions. And he asks, should we focus more on providing education to underserved children that have been deprived of this opportunity since beginning? Or should we focus more on those children that got affected by COVID-19 and lost learning opportunities that were in school before? For a developing country, it won't be easy to cater to both, right? And that's really at the heart of the tensions that you've been talking about. And I'd be also very curious to hear how, Heriberto, you recommend to make choices. Then, hang on. I think it's too many questions now, which I cannot read anymore. So I suggest I share the questions afterwards with the panelists, but let me finish with one question to both of you. What are your biggest hopes for coming out of this pandemic for human development or for the world basically, or sustainable development, and what are your biggest fears? So these are the questions which you can answer so that we probably end this seminar by 5:05. Who would like to start? Heriberto, you please start.
Thank you for the questions. About when this is going to be over, we don't know. The one thing that I would stress is in terms of timing is that for developing countries, we are not even in the peak. So unfortunately, we expect a very challenging second part of the year. And it's very hard to see how this is going to end because of all of the associated vulnerabilities in these countries. And so this is becoming fast a humanitarian crisis. Yeah, so this is one of I connect this with the fears that this might be getting worse and worse. And this is why the points that Uwe was highlighting about the cooperation, international cooperation, is crucial because one country cannot help alone. It requires a big coalition. So that's an important part of the solution. So about the question of these tensions, I think it's very important because depending on how we respond is probably how we're going to go out of this crisis. If we just focus on tackling the urgent, probably that's going to help certainly, but we are going to go in a path that is not going to be very ambitious. It's interesting to look at what happened after the Second World War. So there was this big emphasis on reconstruction. The World Bank, as a matter of fact, was created as a bank of reconstruction. But very soon, it was acknowledged that, well, we want to rebuild Europe, but we have all of these other countries that are very poor and they need support. So sometimes when we start to see things in this way, in which we see that some of us need to build back, but we also see that at the same time there are others that have nothing. That's a space to reach an agreement and to be able to set a standard that is reasonably high for everyone. So I think this is the mindset that will allow us to push in the direction of progress for everyone. And to the extent that we see the expenditure as investment, then we should be able to push forward this policy. This should be financially sustainable, because these countries where we are when we are spending more are countries that are going to be able to grow in the future. So that's my biggest hope, that we are going to be able to come up with this universal view, and that we are going to be able to level up our aspirations for development. I'm going to leave it here.
Ja, dann nehme ich mal Bezug auf die Frage, can we ever go back to where we were before? I would say this is the wrong questions. Do we want to go back? Nein, wir wollen nicht zurückgehen. Also ich persönlich will es nicht, denn ich habe es ja schon ausgeführt. Wenn wir wieder dahin gehen, zurückgehen, woher wir kommen, dann ist das Ende der Menschheit. Und das ist nicht nur meine Idee, sondern das ist das, was wir in der Paris-Erklärung und was wir in der Nachhaltigkeitsagenda 2015 jeweils von 190 Ländern unterschrieben bekommen haben. Und deswegen ist es nicht richtig zu wünschen, dass wir wieder zurückgehen zu dem Stand, wo wir waren, sondern wir müssen endlich Fortschritte machen, und zwar in einer Richtung, die ökologische und die menschenrechtliche, die humanitären Situationen einfach gerecht wird. Genau das will ich, dass Politik endlich die Chance nimmt. Aufgrund der Krise hat sie bessere Chancen, sich die Politik an der Nachhaltigkeitsagenda und an der Paris-Erklärung, an den Menschenrechten zu orientieren. Das ist doch die ganz große Möglichkeit. Und da passt auch Silkes Frage, was sind denn die größten Hoffnungen oder die größten Befürchtungen, die ich habe? Ja, die größten Hoffnungen sind natürlich darin, dass die Menschheit möglichst schnell einen wirksamen Impfstoff findet, um das Problem wirklich dauerhaft zu lösen. Wobei natürlich, wenn wir morgen einen Impfstoff haben, dann geht es übermorgen so weiter wie bisher. Und genau das will ich eigentlich nicht. Aber der Impfstoff ist trotzdem richtig, weil diejenigen Menschen, die davon betroffen sind, einfach auch schwer gestraft werden, obwohl sie nichts dafür können. Und meine größte Befürchtung ist, dass es tatsächlich eine Triage gibt, also ein Abkoppeln der ärmsten Länder von der globalen Entwicklung. Auch das ist nicht nur eine Sache zwischen den Ländern, sondern das ist auch eine Sache innerhalb der Länder. Wissen Sie, wir werden vielleicht wieder das Wachstum haben, aber wir werden sicherlich nicht den Wohlstand mehr haben. Wenn ich hier an diese ganz vielen, an die Künstlerszene, an die selbstständigen kleinen Unternehmer denke, an die Wirtschaftsleute, Wirtschaften, ja, die Kneipenbesitzer und Betreiber, wie die eigentlich geschädigt worden sind, die haben ja also auch wirklich, wenn das mal wieder in Gang kommen sollte, einfach Jahre zu tun, um das aufzuholen. Nein, wir haben viel zu wenig getan, um hier auszugleichen. Wir haben uns dann auf Lufthansa und andere Unternehmen konzentriert, und auch die Mehrwertsteuererhöhung ist auch nichts anderes als eine Unterstützung der Wirtschaft, der Großen. Die Kleinen werden davon relativ wenig haben. Und das ist eben meine größte Befürchtung, die größte Hoffnung, möglichst schnell einen Impfstoff zu haben, dass die Welt auch sieht, da ist eine Chance drin, endlich die Politik an den SDGs und der Paris-Erklärung und an den Menschenrechten auszurichten. Und die größte Befürchtung ist, dass eben die Triage stattfindet.
Many thanks to both of you for this very interesting presentation and discussion, and also for answering to the questions. To those out there in the cyberspace, I was told that we saved the questions and we will make them available to the panelists. That does not mean that you can easily get an answer. I'm sorry for that, but we have time constraints. For my final words, I'd like to pick up on Heriberto's hopes and Uwe's fears in a way, because I think there's a connection. Because in a way you said, Heriberto, you hope that the pandemic will teach us that we're in this together, right? And that we have to get out of it together, if I sort of roughly paraphrase it. And Uwe, your fear is that not all of, we will exclude some. I mean, many are already excluded. I don't want to diminish that, but that lagging behind and that whole countries and regions are lagging behind might be become even worse. And in a way, that's a wonderful link to Friday and the commemoration of the signing of the UN Charter, which will be taking place. It's not as if the UN has, I mean, the UN was founded to not to bring humankind to heaven, but to save us from hell. And I hope that by using this commemoration, also by using the summit, we can sort of strengthen multilateral cooperation, and that will be one lesson from the pandemic. It's not easy, it's not the most obvious lesson given the geopolitical climate at the moment, and also given sort of the fatigue that we see in many countries with regard to multilateralism. But I hope at least that we will see something like that this year. This is also the link to some advertisement on Friday from 10 to 11:30. There's going to be another UN Association a webinar, a commemoration of the signing of the San Francisco Charter, and you are all invited to that. With that, I would like to, again, thank you very much, Heriberto and Uwe, and also the whole UN Association team, which made the whole event possible, and of course, all of you out there who brought in their questions and who hopefully also gained something by listening to us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.